Hey everybody, as always, my sources are going to be listed on my show notes, and you can find that on the website or whatever platform you're listening from. Some of you ask how you can support the podcast, and there are a few ways. You can buy us a coffee. Just go to our website and click the donate and then buy me a coffee icon. You'll have the option to support us monthly for $5, $10, or $20 a month. Or you can leave a one-time donation of $5, $10, $15, how much ever you want. When you buy us a coffee, you're helping us with production fees, equipment fees, as well as helping us pay for our websites and research cost. But you don't have to spend money to support us. You can go on Apple and give us a 5-star rating, or Spotify. You can leave us a review. We sure do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank y'all so much for listening. I'm Darlene, Melody's my co-host, and you're listening to Hard Times and True Crimes.
In 1891, a millionaire named Herman Ulrich invited some friends and fellow club members to his oceanfront home. Their conversation turned to sharks. One of the gentlemen stated that he had noticed a lot more sharks around that year, and he was glad no one had been attacked. Mr. Ulrich stated that that was hogwash, and sharks were as harmless as kittens and simply did not have a taste or desire for human flesh. "I mean it," he said. "I've studied sharks for years, and no shark has ever bit a human." The men were caught off guard by his claims, and many of them argued back, saying how they had heard of this person or that person who had been killed or had a leg or arm bitten off. Yes, but do you personally know anyone who was attacked? And all of them had to admit they weren't personally acquainted with anyone who had been shark bitten, but they had heard stories. Mr. Ulrich took him down to the sea, told him that he'd prove it to him once and for all. He dove right into the ocean with sharks in the water, and even swam right up next to one. And he got out of the water feeling a little proud and arrogant. But his friends still weren't convinced. Just because one shark didn't attack one man doesn't mean they'll never attack humans. So Mr. Ulrich said he'd place a bet for $250 and put it in the newspaper that there is not a single authentic instance of a man, woman, or child having been bitten by a shark. He said he would give the money to anyone who could prove otherwise. And then he raised the offer to $500, which would be worth more than $13,000 today. And in 1891, he placed that ad. A couple of people tried to claim the winnings, but their stories were disproved. When he died in 1906, no one had ever claimed the money, and the offer had stood for 25 years. Scientists in the early 1900s agreed. They believed sharks would not attack unless they were provoked. And in 1916, they published a scientific journal article saying that sharks were not a serious threat to humans, as long as they were in temperate waters of the northeastern United States. And that was great news for Jersey Shore beachgoers, because theirs were the temperate waters of the northeastern United States. But that same year, in 1916, the events that inspired the Jaws movie would take place on the Jersey Shore. Happy Shark Week, y'all.
The sea was a scary place to most people prior to the 1800s. Books written about murderous pirates flying black flags with skulls and crossbones, fishermen's tales, storms, sea creatures, and, just the fear that comes with the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Working class people, many of them, they had to make their living on the ocean. Some had to become fishermen, pirates. Peasants even had to fish for their supper and might even get in and cool off at the end of a day. But most aristocrats weren't interested in the risks associated with the sea prior to the mid-18th century, at least not for anything other than travel.
Right. Yeah.
I remember being surprised that over at Plymouth, the Pilgrims didn't utilize the ocean more, but they were actually afraid.
I can relate to that. I'm afraid of the ocean.
Why are you afraid of the ocean?
I just have a fear of just being out and drowning.
Yeah.
And I'm a swimmer. I mean, I can swim, but it just, like, I don't take cruises with my friends. They all cruise. And I'm like, no, I'll pass. I have taken cruises and I didn't enjoy it at all. And seasick too, so.
Oh, really? On a cruise?
Oh, yes, both times.
That's awful.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Like me and my sister, we went to Myrtle Beach and we would swim out like way, way, way past where the lifeguards would have to call us back.
Oh.
But now, no. I was braver when I was younger. So, but then overcrowding in large cities, it became a health concern, right?
Yeah.
And, think London, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, epidemics popping up all the time. Cholera, polio, yellow fever, influenza, tuberculosis. And at first, these diseases were blamed on the poor, their hygiene, and believe it or not, even their loose moral characters. And it was true that the poorest parts of the cities, they did suffer most, but money or social standing didn't give the upper class immunity to these outbreaks. Society became increasingly interested in their health, especially high society, because poor people didn't have time to be health conscious.
Or money.
Exactly. Suddenly, higher classes, instead of treating sicknesses, they were interested in how to prevent them. They wanted to become stronger and more resilient, healthy. They didn't do much exercise, especially aristocrats who lived in the city. They didn't do much beyond walking. Physicians always seemed to prescribe rest to women who were thought to be fragile and weak. But the poor, again, like they didn't have time to rest much or even really think about their health.
And they were probably working 16, 18-hour days.
Especially in Victorian times, right?
They just didn't have the luxury of being able to rest for their health.
Exactly. But country dwellers, they were noticeably stronger and often healthier, especially the working class who physically worked hard, who got fresh air, lived by the sea, ate fresh foods. City dwellers, they just had a whole host of other issues like stale air, sometimes unsanitary living conditions, and contaminated water supplies, that kind of thing. So doctors kind of caught on to this, and they started to prescribe fresh air and sea bathing for everything from tuberculosis to broken bones to skin diseases. Yeah.
Broken bones?
Broken bones.
Sea air is going to help that?
Apparently.
Interesting. That's funny.
Have you heard of like cold plunging, like taking cold?
Oh, yes. Like they do in Finland.
Yeah. Well, they started prescribing cold plunge. Yeah.
Well, my grandma would have said that would give you pneumonia.
Mine too.
Dive.
Mine too. They prescribed cold plunging to their patients as long as they were in good physical health to treat things like nervous ailments and depression.
Interesting. Well, that's what you and I need to try.
We do.
Not that we're depressed, but...
Physicians believe that the shock of the cold, salty, and rough sea was healthy, and they wrote literal prescriptions to their patients with instructions for exactly how long, how often, and what surf they needed to bathe in.
Oh, wow. What, surf?
Yep. For men, oftentimes they wanted them to go out and get in there and swim. It was exercise.
Right.
It would make them stronger. Now, women, not so much. But in the Camden, New Jersey Telegraph from 1893, there was an article that said, sea bathing is a powerful tonic. The dissolved salts, the changing and cooler currents of the air, the impact of the waves upon the body has a stimulating mental effect to him who is able to make sea bathing safe. I'm assuming that means those who can swim.
Yeah.
Here's another one that was pretty funny. It said the advantages of sea bathing are becoming so apparent to physicians and perceptible to invalids that a new enterprise is being started in furnishing fresh seawater to hospitals and families in Philadelphia. Seawater has been shipped in small quantities for some time, but the demands have so increased that it is now shipped by the barrel, and a good profit is being realized by selling it at retail. It is an open question whether this trade will ever warrant the laying of pipes to establish seawater bathing facilities inland. The matter is being discussed.
That's wild.
Yeah, that was a newspaper out of New Jersey. Another article, the purity of the sea is one of the secrets of success of the treatment of children's ailments. With the daily application of salt water to the whole body and limbs, it's easy to see why children gain health and strength at the seashore.
Interesting. I will say, when you swim in the ocean and a wave comes over and takes you down and you basically get a saline bath in your nose.
Yes.
After I've gone to the beach and I have swam, I've come back and my sinuses have been so good for weeks after that.
I'm so glad you said that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Are you getting ready to say that?
I'm so glad because listen to this. Women were also prescribed sea bathing for ailments of the mind and body. They didn't go out by themselves. They had attendees like nurses who specialized in sea bathing. So every day for weeks at a time, they would go to these spas by the sea, and they would be taken out, the patients, out in the very cold water, and they would plunge the patients in just as the wave broke, having their heads held down, basically waterboarding them.
Yes. Oh, gosh.
The cold baths and near drowning were prescribed to women with weak nerves or depression.
Or in menopause.
Exactly. As a method of toughening them up.
Oh, my goodness.
And this was also prescribed to young girls who were too pale.
Oh, my gracious. Well, what about young guys who were too pale?
Seriously. I just thought all that was interesting. And
well, I have been a little jealous this week of everybody putting their beach pictures on Facebook. And I'm like, I want to go to the beach so bad. I don't want to go out in the middle of the ocean and take a cruise, but I would love to go lay on the shore. And enjoy the sun. But that brings on a whole new meaning to that.
Exactly. Well, we went to Emerald Isle. Actually, it was July 4th. Yeah, we went to Emerald Isle. And of course, I was researching this.
While you were there?
Yeah. And Emerald Isle just happens to have the record of North Carolina shark attacks.
Oh.
Yeah. So
you were finding that out while you were there?
And of course, my boys, thinking they're Michael Phelps. Going way out. And I was freaking out.
Oh, my goodness.
But anyway, by the mid to late 1800s, seaside resorts were popping up, mostly for the wealthy at first. But with the expansion of the railway, it made the beach accessible to the working class as well. The turn of the century, it was pretty exciting, right? Full of opportunity for the Jersey Shore as a whole. There was a boardwalk, amusement parks, and fun for people of all classes. It was just a great time.
That sounds fun. Jersey Shore.
Yeah. In June of 1916, an announcement was made by the Board of Health and Safety. There was an official outbreak of infantile paralysis disease, which is also known as polio.
Oh.
At the time, they thought only young children were susceptible.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because the majority that got it, they were very young, under the age of 5, most of them.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and we know, that would change. But that year, 1916, more than 27,000 cases were confirmed in the U.S.
Wow.
So children were getting deathly sick, and some were dead within a week. It was very fast acting, and it was still a mystery.
Yeah, much like COVID was to us.
Without a stimulus check and air conditioning.
Right.
So on top of polio, there was an oppressive heat wave that was also in full swing, and people were dying from that. It was so hot in the city. Polio was thought to be a summertime only disease because that's when it would hit. In fact, after 1916, for years, it would come in the summer.
Waves of it would flare up in the hot months?
The heat and the epidemic, it hit big cities the hardest. So thousands of New Yorkers, people from Boston and Philly, they gathered up their children. They hit the steam railway and they flocked like geese to the Jersey Shore where they could just forget about everything and enjoy their summer and save their kids, right? That particular summer, class did not matter. The elite and the poor were all packed together like sardines in train cars, literally running for their kids' lives from polio and the city's stifling heat.
And can you imagine being packed in those train cars, how many germs they were actually spreading and didn't even know?
Yes. And there were cases that popped up on the shore. Because of those railways, they were able to come and just spend a weekend on the shore. So a lot of working class people did that. And then some upper class, they would stay in resorts throughout the whole summer. The summer before, in 1915, it had been the most profitable so far on the Jersey Shore. But 1916 was expected to be even busier with the epidemic and the heat wave. And the first few weeks of the season were proven that to be true. Steam trains were coming in packed to the brim every weekend, filled with thousands of beachgoers.
Wow.
So the Ingleside Hotel was a beautiful Victorian hotel on Ingleside Avenue in Beach Haven, New Jersey. Beach Haven was a resort town that opened up every summer. The hotel was magnificent from the start. It had modern conveniences like private baths with salt and fresh water.
Oh.
The owner, who was a Quaker, he even brought in cows from his personal farm so that the guest children could have fresh milk. The Ingleside never served alcohol, but they had tennis, concerts, baseball, and dances all throughout the summer season.
Nice.
So it was a pretty happening place to be. It just sounds like the Jersey Shore was just happy.
Yeah.
And families could come, escape, and just enjoy themselves. Just like this year, actually, the 4th of July fell on a Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that gave the people an extended holiday to spend at the beach that year. So on July 1st, which was a Sunday, the afternoon train from Philly arrived at Long Island. And 25-year-old Charles Van Sant was one of the passengers. He was a dark-haired, handsome young businessman who had graduated from college 2 years earlier and had a great job with Philadelphia's Falwell Brothers brokerage firm. He was a sweet, ambitious guy and had lots of friends and admirers. In college, he had been a member of the Glee Club. He managed the school's newspaper. He played golf. He played baseball. He kept almost perfect grades, all while maintaining his relationship with the Lord. He was a very faithful, dedicated member of the Presbyterian Church. This long holiday weekend, though, Charles was very much looking forward to swimming, his favorite pastime, and spending the holiday with his family. Van Sant's father, Dr. Eugene Van Sant, was a prominent ear, nose, and throat doctor. He had growing concerns about this infantile paralysis disease. And so he suggested to his family that they go just get away and enjoy their holiday at the Jersey Shore, which was their usual vacation spot anyway. They were there most every summer. When they got off the train, it was around 5 p.m. The family checked into their hotel room at the Ingleside and made dinner reservations for that night. Van Sant asked his sister, Louise, if she wanted to walk down to the beach with him before dinner. There were 2 slots. There was 6:30 and 8. I never was clear on which reservation they made, but they wanted to go down and see the beach real quick before
they ate.
She agreed, and they walked down to the beach and talked. When they got down there, he saw a big old Chesapeake Bay retriever.
Oh.
And he loved dogs, so he was pretty excited and started playing fetch with him. Van Sant went out into the water a little ways, and the dog followed him, which was really sweet. So he kind of stayed close to the shore, just playing with them. And by this time, his dad and his other sister had finished packing, so they walked down to the beach and were laughing, watching Charles play in the water with the dog. He turned and swam out past the breakers up to about his chest, and he was calling for the dog to go out there with him, but the dog wasn't interested. So all of a sudden, the crowd on the beach that included his family saw what looked like a huge dark fin above a big black figure headed straight for Van Sant.
Can you imagine?
No. They started yelling at him, trying to warn him, but he couldn't hear him. And he was still actually yelling and trying to get the dog to come out there with him.
Oh, I can hear in my head the Jaws music already.
Yes. All of a sudden, Van Sant was screaming, and he was being pulled underwater. He came back up, and there was blood all in the water around him. The lifeguard on duty that day was Alexander Ott. He had swam in the Olympics and also happened to be a personal friend of Van Sant's. They would hang around each other during the summers that they spent on the Jersey Shore. Ott swam out. He really actually wasn't exactly sure what was going on, but he realized that his friend was in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So when he got out there, he grabbed Van Sant under the arms to pull him to shore. It was a struggle to pull him because the shark was still biting Van Sant's leg
Oh.
the entire time and did not turn him loose until his belly touched the sand.
So
it
he
pulled him
came
up
that far
far.
in.
I mean, I just want to take a minute and say how brave
Yeah.
that guy was.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he literally risks his own life. Van Sant's family was horrified when
I'm
he
horrified.
was... Me too. But when he was hoisted out of the water, most of his left leg had been crudely torn off. The flesh was ripped off from his thigh to his knee, all along the back of his leg. His bone was exposed, and blood was pumping
Oh, my goodness.
out of his leg.
Oh.
There was also a nasty tear in his right leg. Alexander Ott, the lifeguard, took a woman's skirt. It might have even been Van Zant's sister's because she was there when they pulled him out, and made a tourniquet to try to stop the bleeding. He was carried into the Ingleside Hotel where his dad tried in vain to save his life.
Oh.
I know. He had a torn femoral artery, and in those days, there just wasn't any way to fix that.
I was expecting him to live without and not have a leg, so he didn't even make it.
No.
Oh.
Mm-mm. In fact, his injuries were so bad that even with today's medical advances, I doubt he could have survived an attack like that.
Wow.
I don't know if he could have made it to the hospital.
Right. I mean, you said that blood was pumping out of his leg. That's, oh, yikes.
It makes me so sad because his dad probably knew from the minute he saw his son, but had to try to save him.
Right.
So Charles Van Sant was the first victim of the New Jersey shark attack, and he was dead within 1 hour.
How old was he?
He was 25.
Oh, that is terrible. At the prime of his life.
Yeah.
First day of his vacation.
First,
first
hour.
Yeah. Oh.
He was dead before dinner.
Yeah. This freak accident.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, I don't guess it was an accident.
Right. And that's kind of how everybody else saw it too, because his death had actually been the first recorded shark attack on the East Coast in the U.S.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But surprisingly, New York and New Jersey newspapers, they kind of skirted around it.
Huh. I wonder why.
Yeah. They didn't want to affect business on the shore.
Yeah. They're tourists.
Yeah.
It was like
it's a
part
tourist
of their
destination. And that was their moneymaker.
Because you would think that would be big news, like the first time a person has gotten eaten by a shark.
Yeah. And it was on page 18.
What?
Yeah. So it was really buried.
Definitely.
There was a very small write-up that in the local paper that read, Beach Haven, New Jersey, July 1, Charles Van Sant, 25 years old, son of a Philadelphia physician, was attacked by a shark or other big fish.
Okay.
While bathing in the surf off here late today, according to witnesses, and died before he could be rescued. So that's kind of surprising. The newspapers were very hesitant to call it a shark attack, as were experts.
And do you think that was for the same reason? They didn't want to scare the tourists and mess up tourism?
I think that was part of the reason.
Or were they really just unsure of what it was?
I do think they, obviously didn't want to deter visitors from the shore. Another newspaper article was written assuring bathers that they did not need to be afraid because the shark was probably trying to get the dog. They reminded their readers of Ulrich's $500 reward that was never claimed.
Okay.
Swimmers, they just trusted that this was a freak accident, and, they just weren't really worried about it because the leading scientists were saying sharks do not attack people. The beaches were still crowded every day, but in their defense, people were dying in the big cities. It was hot, and I mean, depressingly hot. Kids were dying. They were slap dab in the middle of World War I. And I think they just wanted to be in a happy place. And I think Jersey Shore was a happy place to be.
Yeah.
Well,
it was their summer beach vacation.
Right. And they weren't ready to...
Nobody wants to give that up.
Exactly. So Spring Lake, New Jersey was just north of Beach Haven. And it was a beautiful Victorian beach town. I want to go there now. The Essex and Sussex Hotel in Spring Lake was a grand old hotel by the sea. It was only open for 3 months in the summer. The rich and the famous vacationed there. The hotel hosted extravagant high society parties. A 26-year-old guy by the name of Charles Bruder from Switzerland worked at the hotel seasonally. He was just a really good guy that everybody enjoyed being around. Bruder sent money home to his mother every paycheck, which I thought was super sweet.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually her sole supporter because his older brother was fighting for Switzerland in World War I.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So Bruder worked the hot daytime hours, toting luggage for the hotel's wealthy guests. He and his coworkers, who were also friends, they looked forward to their lunch hour because they could go down to the beach and swim and get cooled off. It was hot.
Yeah.
On July 6th in 1916, Bruder and Henry Nolan, they walked down to the shore for their afternoon swim. They did this all the time. On the way down there, he met one of his friends coming back, and he was like, it's cold. He was like, but you either get numb or get used to it. The water was in the low 60s that day.
Oh, that's frigid. In July?
Yeah. And it was hot. It was unseasonably hot.
Why was that water so cold?
Okay. There was a bunch of scientific explanations for it, but I don't understand it. It's like Chinese.
Those would go right over my head. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. There were the easterly, the winds and this and that. But yeah. So they met up with some other friends who were already out there swimming, but everybody else got too cold and they worn out long before Bruder, which was pretty common. He was a really strong swimmer and he liked showing off a little bit and going out further than everybody else. So his friends headed back to the shore, but Bruder swam out about 130 yards.
What?
Yeah.
That's way out.
Young guys did that all the time for exercise. His friends were drying off when they heard his terrible screams.
Oh.
A woman yelled to the lifeguards that it looked like a canoe painted red had turned over in the water. Her brain hadn't even comprehended what she was seeing, and that was the only thing that made sense to her.
Right.
When she saw that red under the water, she was like, it must be a canoe turned over.
Wow.
Because she was seeing it at the top of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Captain George White and Chris Anderson were the lifeguards that day. They looked out, and from their vantage point, they saw Bruder struggling and the bloody water that was circling him. So they jumped into action, got a rescue rowboat, and went out to him as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. He was bobbing up and down in the water, really struggling to stay afloat. They finally reached him, and Bruder managed to say, "A shark bit me."
Oh.
They tried giving him an oar so that he could pull himself up, but he was too weak and he couldn't. So they pulled him over and they worked together, took him under the arms and pulled him up out of the water. They were both surprised at how easy it was to pull him up. They just expected there to be, more weight. They soon realized that both of his legs had been torn off below the knee.
Oh.
The two men were shocked at the injuries. Bruder stared up at the sky and almost immediately after getting into the boat lost consciousness and he died of blood loss or, shock. When the doctors arrived to examine the body, he couldn't right away because he had to treat multiple women who had passed out and vomited on the beach after seeing Bruder's body. Ooh. It was that bad. If you want to fast forward through this part, at first I was like, oh.
All right, I'm going to hold on to my seat for it.
Yeah, it's rough. Most of the flesh on his right leg had been ripped off. His lower leg bones were torn off between his knee and his ankle. Leg muscle and fat were hanging in shreds from both of his legs. And his lower left leg bones were torn off as well. Any bone that was there was no flesh on it.
Wow.
He had also been bitten in the stomach, like an apple size taken out of his stomach. It was just horrific.
That sounds horrific.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
The media's response this time was different. Well, first of all, this happened on the rich side of the beach.
Mm-hmm.
In front of the wealthy.
Yeah.
The shore's richest and most famous guests. And one of these guests had a first-hand eyewitness account of the attack. And she was a popular reporter's wife. She was not going to let this be ignored. In fact, she called down to all of the hotels on the shore and was like, get your swimmers out of the water.
Oh, good for her.
She was really proactive because I think they probably would have
maybe tried to still play it down a little bit.
This one was all over the front page of the newspaper.
Finally, yeah.
And actually all over the country.
First one was just like a little blip on the screen.
Yep.
But that second one brought it all into forefront of everybody's mind.
Exactly.
I just have a quick question, and you may get to this. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they know if it was the same shark?
We'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Scientists were having to backpedal. 3 leading experts had just a couple of months prior published a scientific journal article about how sharks don't attack unprovoked. And they even said that sharks' teeth were not strong enough to cut through human bone.
I was thinking when you were telling about those injuries, I was like, those had to be some dang sharp teeth to cut through the bones like that. I was thinking that.
Yeah. They used the example of how difficult it was for a saw to cut through a leg of lamb. And they're like, there's no way. Their teeth just aren't strong enough. Even after Bruder's attack, most of them doubled down on the unlikelihood of another attack. Again, they brought up Ulrich's reward and, that went unclaimed for 25 years. Many experts claimed that these incidents could not happen again in another 1,000 years. They were freak happenings. One Coast Guard superintendent wrote that sharks are as timid as rabbits. He said he'd swam through schools of them and had never been attacked. If they got too close, all he ever had to do was throw a clam at them and they went away.
Who said this?
This was the Coast Guard superintendent.
I don't believe him.
Yeah. Thankfully, the resort owners did have the good sense, though, to make people get out of the water until they put up a steel mesh net in between swimmers to keep the swimmers in and to keep the sharks out. And they did this really quickly because they didn't want to risk losing their summer tourists.
Right.
They also patrolled the swimming areas with motorboats equipped with guns and like
wow. It's like a modern day Jaws.
Yeah.
Or
it really is.
Not modern day, but it's like a real life Jaws.
The author had this in mind when he wrote Jaws, which I believe.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It really does.
Even after that, the people kept coming. People weren't getting in the water like they had been, but they weren't staying away. One newspaper advertisement for one of the resorts read, "Come down and laugh at the sharks. We have enclosed our bathing area with reinforced steel nets."
That's unbelievable.
The Sussex and Essex hotel owner, they did pay for Bruder's funeral expenses, but unfortunately his body could not be transported back to Switzerland because of the war, which is so sad.
That is very sad.
He has a tombstone and they did give him a good burial. Friends, hotel staff, and wealthy guests took up a collection of $1,000 to send to his heartbroken mother, which I thought was $1,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
In 1916.
But he was her sole source of support. So once that was gone, which she did have another son in the war, I believe. But still, I mean, I'm sure the finances were the least of her worries. She had lost her son like in a horrific way. But it's just sad all the way around.
Yeah. By July 12th, things were starting to get calmed back down again. You know how it is. Like there's big news and everybody's freaked out about it and then it just dies down.
It doesn't happen for several days and everything's always fine now. Refresh my memory. One of those attacks was on the 4th and the next one was on the 6th?
One was on the 1st.
Oh, okay.
And one was on the 6th.
Okay.
So people were just starting to feel safe on the shore again. They were getting in water. They had those mesh, those nets.
Yeah, and I bet those nets would have made me feel safer too.
Oh, me too. Yeah. I would have got in, I'm sure. Yeah, I definitely would have. In Matawan, New Jersey, it was a sweltering hot day. Now, Matawan was a little town about 16 miles inland from the sea. Nothing like the Jersey Shore. It was mostly made up of working class families. I kind of imagine it like the Mayberry of New Jersey.
Okay.
Friendly people, good neighbors. They had a deputy that doubled as a town barber. Matawan Creek flowed right through the middle of their town, and it was brackish water that the town's kids, of course, really enjoyed during the summertime. They didn't have swimming pools or beaches like they did on the shore, so they played there and swam for hours on the hot afternoons, showing off their cannonballs and diving skills. A lot of Madeline's children also had summer jobs at the local basket factory. And one of those kids was a little boy named Lester Stillwell. He was 11 years old, and he was a hard worker, and he played hard too.
Now you got to bring kids into this, don't you?
I know. He nailed baskets together at the factory all summer long, but on July 12th, 1916, Lester got off early at 1:45. He ran from work to go play baseball with his friends. Now, Lester, he was epileptic, and he sometimes had trouble walking, and sometimes the kids they all liked him, but, they would dare him to do stuff, or they'll be like, you never go out in the deep, that kind of thing. So anyway, Thomas Cottrell, he was a sea captain, and he also lived in Matawan. He was fishing that day in the creek. He could not believe it when he looked down and spotted an 8-foot shark in the creek.
What in the world?
He lived there his entire life. He had never seen anything like that, and he was panicking. In the creek.
That's fresh water?
It's brackish.
Brackish. What's that
so
mean?
It's like, that means there's a little, mostly fresh water, a little bit of salt water.
Oh, yeah. My goodness.
Mm-hmm. So he ran, of course, into town to warn everybody to, sound the alarms because
the kids
there's
played
a shark. But the people didn't believe him. He was a drinker a little bit, and he was a little bit of a bragger. And they were like, yeah, right.
They just blew him off.
And they were good people, but they had no...
Well, it sounds unbelievable.
It really did. So they just went on about their day. But when Cottrell realized that the townspeople weren't going to sound the alarm, he rowed his boat up and down the creek himself, warning people about the shark.
Okay, good for him.
But unfortunately, the group of local boys that included Lester Stillwell had just missed the captain.
Oh.
So they ran to the creek, laughing and playing, all jumping in together at the same time. And Lester, because he had been teased, you never go out to the deep. He went out and was like, look, because he was floating on his back. Mm-hmm. And he was, look at me. And one of the boys had brought his dog to swim with them. They were just doing what boys do.
Yeah.
So the friends were all swimming at a place called Wyckoff Dock when they saw what looked like an old log in the water. But then a dorsal fin popped up and the boys realized that this was a shark.
Oh my gosh.
So they all started as fast as they could to get out of the water. But Lester, he was way out in the middle.
Oh.
His friends looked back and saw him get pulled under the water by the shark. So his friends, of course, ran to get help. Several men, including a 24-year-old man named Watson Stanley Fisher, came up to help. Fisher had just been with the boys when they were playing baseball, and they had asked him to get in the game, and he always did. Like, he was just a good guy, so he played a little bit with them. He wanted to go and help Lester. They really thought that he just had a seizure.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because he went under.
Mm-hmm. And he did have violent seizures. And his family may not have even known about the captain,
right,
depending on where they were that day.
And the timeline, I mean, it probably, if it had just happened.
Exactly. The water was too dark to see, but Stanley Fisher somehow felt around and he found Lester's body. Oh. He had him in his arms and was trying to swim back to the shore when all of a sudden Fisher was attacked by the shark.
Oh gosh, him too?
Right in front of the townspeople. I mean, everybody's on the shore.
Oh,
and they were so panicked that nobody jumped in to help him.
They didn't know what to do.
They literally did not know what to do. He dropped Lester's body, of course, as he was being pulled under. And the water around Fisher started turning red. He didn't even realize the extent of his injuries. He was swimming, back up, and they did help him once he got up there to get out. They said that 10 pounds of flesh was torn from his body.
Oh, my word.
His leg bone had been exposed and was profusely spurting blood. And he was asking the doctor, like, am I going to be okay? Do you think I'll have to get this amputated? And the doctor's like, no, you're going to be fine. He was asking about his artery and this and that. And the doctor just did everything he could to comfort him.
Did the doctor know that he, okay, just keep telling me because I've got a lot of questions here.
His right thigh was also injured really, really bad. He was able to make it to the Monmouth Memorial Hospital in Long Branch, but he bled to death and died at 5:30 p.m.
Oh, okay. So my question, did the doctor already know he was going to die?
Yeah.
He was just trying to make him feel better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he was in shock, so he didn't realize, which is, I'm glad. Like,
yeah, it's kind of like a mercy there.
Yeah. Joseph Dunn, who was 12 years old, and his 14-year-old brother, they actually lived in New York, New Jersey. They're very close. And it was so hot in their city apartment. They loved going to their aunt's house. And with the train, they were able to go for day trips.
Okay.
So she lived in Cliffwood, New Jersey. The boys absolutely loved it there. I mean, compared to the city, it was like a wonderland. So the same day that Lester, Stillwell, and Fisher were attacked, the brothers took the train to their aunt's for a day trip. They took those day trips a lot during the summer months. And that particular day, they were meeting up with a friend to go swimming. They met at their favorite swimming spot, which happened to be on a dock at the New Jersey Clay Company. It was a brickyard, and they kind of had to sneak because they would get in trouble by the workers.
Yeah.
But there was a ladder there, and the water was deeper. So they could, jump. It was just funner. They could do more tricks and dive. And like I said, there was that ladder. So it was easy to get in and get out, that kind of thing. The boys were totally oblivious to what had happened just downstream. 30 minutes after the attack on Lester and Fisher, about a half mile up the stream from the Wyckoff dock, the shark attacked 12-year-old Joseph Dunn. His older brother, Michael, he made it, and the friend made it, and then turned around and sees his brother.
Oh, yeah.
He grabs a hold of his brother, and so does the other boy. I give them so much credit, and they basically play tug-of-war with the shark.
Good heavens.
Yes, and they rescued him.
Can you imagine that, though?
No,
oh,
I can't.
Word.
The boy was taken to St. Peter's University Hospital in New Brunswick in critical condition, but he did recover.
Okay, so he's finally one that lived.
He was in the hospital, though, until September 15th. So that's a long...
That is a long time.
That's a long hospital stay. So it was very serious.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lester Stillwell's body was found 2 days later, 150 feet upstream.
Oh, poor Lester.
Yeah. And now the people were mad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were over the shark. Some people said, like, oh, bull sharks, because they will travel in brackish water.
Okay.
But other people who had seen it said there's no way. This was a great white.
Mm.
Some said it was a tiger shark. Nobody really knew. So needless to say, people were hunting sharks like crazy. I mean, they were in there with dynamite. They were shooting them. If they saw a shark, they were dead, right?
Yeah. It's kind of just like the movie.
Yeah. Some fishermen claimed that they had caught the man-eater because there was a reward too.
Okay.
A blue shark was killed on July 14th near Long Branch, and supposedly, that was the shark. And then 4 days later, Thomas Cottrell, the fisherman that had
tried to warn them?
Yep. He had seen a shark in Matawan Creek called a sandbar shark that he killed, and he said that was probably it. But then on July 14th, there was this taxidermist. He came there from the Barnum and Bailey. He worked with them as a taxidermist. And his name was Michael Schleiser. And he caught a 8-foot, 325-pound juvenile great white shark.
Wow, that's a big shark. And that's a juvenile.
And it was at the mouth of the Matawan Creek. This shark almost sank his boat. So it was serious.
What?
When he opened up his belly, though, he removed pounds of bone and a fleshy material that took up about 2/3 of a milk crate. And altogether, it weighed about 15 pounds. Scientists, they said that this was definitely human flesh.
Remains.
And bones. Yeah. Schlesser mounted the shark, and he proudly displayed it, of course. But that's why he was there. And he put it in the window of a shop in Manhattan on Broadway. And no further attacks were reported along the Jersey Shore in the summer of 1916 after he killed that great white shark. Murphy and Lucas, the scientists, who they were the only ones who were studying shark, even though they had been so wrong, they were still kind of the leading authorities. And they said that the great white was, in fact, the Jersey Shore man-eater.
Wow.
And that ended the 12 Days of Terror.
Oh, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Those were some hard times.
Those sure were.
And I imagine that's about the time all the Yankees started loading up RVs and moving to Florida. Regardless of if you're in New Jersey, Miami, or anywhere in between, if you want to guarantee to never get eaten alive by any animal, make sure you tell everybody you know, and a few people you don't, to check out Hard Times and True Crimes. Until next time, goodbye.